Today on the Matt and Ann Show, we welcome Randy Cross, 49ers legend. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to start the show off by asking you, the 49ers are picking third. It's kind of obvious they're most likely going to pick a quarterback. Who do you think that quarterback's going to be?
Let me start by saying, there's two guys in this draft that don't play quarterback that I think are worthy of going in the first three picks. One would be Penei Sewell.
Yeah.
And the other would be Kyle Pitts. I think it'd be pretty scary to see Kyle Pitts and George Kittle in a Kyle Shanahan offense, personally.
That'd be crazy.
But having said that, I think they'll stay in the SEC, and I think they're going to draft. Personally, I think they'll draft Mac Jones.
That's what I was thinking too. I was thinking for a minute it might be Trey Lance because kind of mysterious right now because he didn't play his senior year, but Mac.
I mean, he's got very little experience, but man, he's got all the measurables you want in a quarterback. I think the one thing that Kyle's looking for besides somebody that can stay healthy.
Yeah.
He needs somebody that can sort of be a smile and dialer. You know, the guy that looks at the field, looks at the defense, falls out of his hand.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if, it's nice if they can run and move and all that. I think with the moves they've made on their offensive line, protection will not be an issue now. as long as the top half of the team doesn't end up on IR. So, yeah, I think it's quarterback.
I have a second part to that. Do you think Jimmy G stays the quarterback for this year, or do you think he's out right after they pick the quarterback?
It depends on value. It depends on what they can get. Because they'll starting, if not last week, at the latest, it'll start today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
They'll get plenty of feelers and, what ifs and gee, would you takes and stuff like that. The most common sense place for him to go might be back to New England. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Belichick loves him. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's everything that Bill wants in a quarterback. He wants that guy that processes and gets rid of the ball and all that. It's impossible to quantify. Guys that unfortunately get hurt. Some guys just get hurt. I'll give you a great example of a guy that got hurt early and then had a long career of never getting hurt. Was Jesse Sapolo.
Oh, true.
Because when Jesse first hit the Niners, man, poor guy was getting hurt all the time, breaking his leg or knee, something. And most teams aren't that patient. They could be patient with him, and man, he turned into an all-timer. But it's that lack of availability can tend to wear out the patience of a team pretty fast.
Absolutely.
Another question. What was like playing with Jerry?
I'm sorry?
What was it like playing with Jerry Rice?
Oh, with the GOAT? Because I do believe, and I got into this, gosh, I was in part of like a documentary movie back, must have been 15 years ago. And I think it was Sports Illustrated or somebody was trying to identify the greatest football player of all time. And, they came down to Jerry and Jim Brown. And I think
not bad choices at all.
For the same reasons, they basically completely redefined what playing that position was. And, I get amused every year when a young receiver comes in or a guy that's been playing 4 or 5 years. He's the fastest guy to ever get to 500 receptions. It's like, that's nice. Yeah. Only needs about 800 to go. to catch JR, and the touchdowns, and Because I mean, I remember it was a big deal when Steve Largent caught that 99th touchdown and then his 100th touchdown and broke the record, and and the guys were putting the bogeys out there. But people forget, these young guys that start off like, their butts are on fire. Jerry wasn't catching like 90, 100 passes his first couple of years. Probably his better known catches were probably non-catches.
Yeah.
He dropped the ball against the Rams down in LA in a big spot and a couple other things. But man, next 20 years, he was killing people. And it is fun to see. So, good question. It was, I played with a couple guys, he and Joe and Ronnie and Fred Dean, Roger Craig. Probably I put Gary Big Hands Johnson in that group, Hacksaw, but guys that it was almost unfair. It was almost an unfair advantage to have them on your team. I wasn't gonna complain about it, but they were good.
Everyone's saying right now it's Tom Brady. He just won his 7th Super Bowl. You played with Joe Montana. He won 4 of them, never lost in the Super Bowl.
Never threw an interception. 11 touchdowns, no interception.
In your opinion, is Joe better than Tom? Is Tom better than Joe? Is Tom the greatest of all time?
Well, for me, obviously, mainly because of my jewelry collection, I would say Joe. But I think the rule changes over the last specifically 20 years. So during Tom Brady's stay in the NFL, and probably even a little bit before that, taking care of the quarterback has become a really high priority.
Yeah.
They couldn't give 2 poops about quarterbacks staying healthy when I played. And I don't mean to be that old guy always saying, when I played, but the play was different. The rules were different. It was a much more violent game. And these guys that play for, it's routine to play for 15 years now, it seems.
Yeah.
If they could have gotten hit the way our quarterbacks got hit when they were available, and the way our guys hit quarterbacks, they'd have had their careers cut in half, kind of like a lot of the guys that played back then.
And you mentioned so many great players from when you were playing to now, but can you get imagine yourself playing with your whole pandemic going on right now?
Could you see yourself playing right now during the pandemic? Do you think that would have affected your game at all, or do you think?
Gosh, I sure wouldn't have wanted to find out, to be honest with you. I admire these guys that can, do this testing every day and the isolation. And I mean, I do a lot of Navy games.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're still kind of locked down. They're not locked down. They just got off about a 30-day quarantine where they were in their dorm rooms when they weren't running or lifting weights. But I don't know. I think the key is people adapt, and that's the most special thing. That's what I'll remember about the 2020 season was the flexibility. And I don't mean yoga, I mean mentally and everything, that both college football and NFL and the NFL showed, and the ability to adjust schedules and adjust everything because of all this craziness.
You were a part of one of the greatest dynasties ever, maybe the greatest in the 80s with the 49ers. Do you have any great memories from there that you can tell us?
A bunch. How long you got?
As long as you want.
Yeah, it's what made. See, I played for Bill Walsh for 10 years, and he joined the Niners my 4th year. Well, he was my 5th head coach. So I knew something about losing. I knew something about surviving. I just, at the pro level, I didn't know much about winning. And, I think that's something that Bill really ingrained in our team severely.
Yeah.
Was sort of how to win and what it took. And a lot of the work ethic, a lot of the training regimen, a lot of that stuff kind of started back with us back then. A little bit with Dallas, but we had the dietary guys, we had the Olympic weightlifting coaches, we had all the resources we needed because of what Bill and Eddie DeBartolo made available for us. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, but we lost so much when I first got there. I mean, the year before Bill got there, the reason he got the job was we had 2 head coaches. My 3rd head coach was a guy named Pete McCulley. And Pete got fired after the 9th game, which happened to be in DC. And that's where I broke my ankle. And the week before I broke my wrist. So I could play with one cast, but the cast on the leg and the arm was a little rough. So I didn't have to play the rest of that year. I was in IR. And those 7 games were about the only ones I ever missed. But I didn't miss that losing because that was the first of 2 and 14 years. So I talk about that kind of to talk about the winning side. So, the 6 years or so, the 7 years of winning were incredible. I mean, of course, we couldn't be trusted, and we screwed up a lot of trust issues with Bill Walsh after the 81 season before that strike year. We partied so hard, a lot of us kind of forgot where the facility was. And we got our butts kicked the next year for a reason. I think we were 3-6 during the strike, the 9-game season. But 83, we were in the title game. 84, we won the Super Bowl. 85, we were in the playoffs. 86 in the playoffs. 87, we were the best team in the league. And again, another life lesson. Got cocky. Kind of read the press clippings. And Minnesota came in and whipped our butt with Anthony Carter and Chris Dolman and Keith Millard, a really good team. And they came in and beat us at Candlestick in the divisional round. Because that was a year we'd have won another Super Bowl that year. I think any year we'd have gotten in, we'd have won, only because of kind of the way we approached it.
You guys were so stacked in the 80s. You had like a great player at every position.
Well, the difference was we were known for an offense.
Yeah.
But you look at our defensive, our roster on D, especially like starting from about 83, 84 on, when stupid San Diego had gotten rid of their defensive line, and we went, oh, okay. Louis Kelcher, big hands, Fred Dean. Yeah, we could take those guys. It was Manu Tuiasosopo, my old UCLA guy from Seattle. We just had, it was sick. That defense, the way they could run, the way they hit people. I mean, our defensive backs, when they were right, between Ronnie and Carlton mainly, they could take the spirit out of a team. They could take a spirit out of the offense because they'd hit people so hard. Well, another example of nowadays, they probably wouldn't let them hit them that hard. But I mean, we went to Pittsburgh in 81, I think. Yeah, 81. And they still had, they were the shit. They still had all their boys. And Stallworth was still there, and Swan was still there, and Stallworth ran a little skinny post over the middle, and not too long into the game, maybe 5-6 plays into the game, and Carlton Williamson, fractured his rib and punctured his lung, and they had to cart him off the field. So from that play on, nobody was catching a ball in the middle of the field if they had any common sense. But that was kind of what our defense would do to people. And yeah, for all the years and years and years of Joe and Jerry, and they were all timers. I laughed my butt off when we were getting ready to play that Super Bowl 19, reading. And anybody tells you they don't read the papers and they don't read stuff, they're freaking lying to you. They read all that stuff. You're reading the papers and all you're hearing about is Dan Marino and the Dolphins and how great their offense is. And I read it. We all kind of read it and laughed. At least those of us on offense. It pissed the guys on defense off. We just kind of laughed at it. We just said those they don't have no idea what they're in for when those guys get at them. And they missed me so much. I retired and they won the Super Bowl again the next year. And I actually got a chance to do that game on radio for CBS Radio.
That's awesome.
I was working with Jack Buck, and Hank Strand was his regular partner, but Hank had done so many speaking engagements, he got laryngitis. So he couldn't even get through the first half of the game.
Yeah. So,
but which was, really the hard half to do, because the Niners just blew their butts out, beat them 55-10, I think, in that Super Bowl. So it was like 41-0 or 40-0 or something at that point. So it took some creative announcing to make it interesting.
Is there a favorite player that you play with that you like?
You have a favorite teammate?
A favorite player?
Favorite teammate that you had?
Or
pros?
Yeah, in the pros, it's hard not to say a guy like, Dwight Clark. Unfortunately, probably my best friends or guys that I got along with the best are no longer with us. John Ayers, who died of bile duct cancer, was the other guard on the other side of me. He was the other guard. We were best buds. Keith Vonhorst, who's my right tackle, we were pretty tight. Obviously DC and everything, and going through everything he went through, and so those guys, mainly on offense, because it is very, very much, and maybe the game's changed today. Maybe the offenses and defenses are kumbaya and hug each other and get along really well. But that wasn't the case back in the day. If you went ones on ones, you were trying to freaking embarrass the other guy, because that's kind of why they pay you. So that's why you do it. So you don't develop too many lifelong friendships.
Absolutely. 49ers kind of had an off year last year, mainly because of injuries. Do you see them going back to where they were in 2019 in the Super Bowl again? I mean, it's going to be a little tougher. Arizona got better. Los Angeles got better. But I think they're right up there.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I thought they were last year. And hopefully this, whoever they draft, either by example or motivation, can improve their quarterback position as much as possible. I've always been a big believer, and I think it goes back to watching the Houston Oilers when they drafted Steve McNair. He was the luckiest quarterback to play in the 90s and for the better part of the next decade, only because he got to watch. He spent a couple of years watching Chris Chandler just get the dog doo-doo beat out of him. I mean, just abused. So, I think if you have that luxury, and then, Mahomes is now the favorite reference. If you have that luxury, fantastic. And if the Niners have that this year, then, that would be it'll make them a better team. But, I looked at the roster the other day. There are more guys on that roster that didn't play last year because they were on IR than there are guys that started. So, they're going to be back. They're going to be tough. I I think their O-line is going to be nasty. They'll have the same rotation of 3 or 4 backs that'll drive people nuts. They may not all have the same name you recognize, but you know, the Juice 44 will be there at fullback, you know, cracking people, and Kittle will do his thing. So yeah, I agree. I think they're a possible Super Bowl team, and you know, it always depends. And people look at you like you're, you know, more cliche BS, but the injuries, the teams that win Super Bowls, the teams that get to Super Bowls, don't get hurt. I'm sorry if that's a cliche, guilty.
You have so much knowledge of your game. Can you see yourself ever coaching at all?
Could you see yourself ever coaching?
I thought about it early on. I did do for a good bit, you know, football camps, lineman camps, things like that, which I really, really enjoyed. I had talked about the same time DC, Dwight Clark got into it. You know, I was picking his brain, and, you know, it would have necessitated dropping what I was doing, which obviously the, you know, risk reward is pretty significant if it comes together and it works. But you know, I don't know. I'm not real big at looking back. I would have loved to maybe coach. I would have loved to maybe been in the front office, but you know, since I graduated from high school, I've had 2 jobs. You know, one was play football, and the other one since 1989 has been talk about football.
Yeah.
So I have no delusions. I've been incredibly lucky.
My final question for you is, you went to UCLA, you were a college football Hall of Famer. You have any great memories from that? And also, what do you think about the upcoming year for UCLA? What do you think they're
going to do? Well, my guys have had a tough time the last several years. Yeah. And I think a lot of us sort of figured when they hired Chip, it would be a relatively immediate kind of transformation. Well, it hasn't worked out that way. And I think mainly because not enough of us maybe knew enough about the hole that they'd kind of dug and the problems that they've gotten themselves into from a talent standpoint. But his recruiting is rectifying that. I would have to say this year is going to be one of those years it's going to have to be reflected in the record, I would think. I mean, so this has got to be one of those years where he busts out to an 8-4 or 9-3, something like that, and challenges some of the big dogs in the Pac-12. The problem is the big dogs are pretty damn big. Oregon's going to be really good. Washington's going to be good. The Trojans are usually good, unfortunately. Hate them. Stanford, as long as they've got David Shaw or Coach Shaw, they're going to be pretty good. Yeah. The Arizonas, the Utahs. So, if they can get that kind of a record, that'll show you that, the talent's starting to come back. It's one thing. I did the NFL for 20 years, and I've been around now the college game for about 12. And the big difference between the two, and there's a lot of them. One of the big differences is you can recruit. You don't have to draft. Yeah. You can actually talk guys into coming to your place, which is a big difference. No, in the Pac-12, it's pathetic the job that they've done as a conference. Selling themselves and making themselves kind of presentable to the rest of the country, so those coaches can go in those living rooms and talk about what they do. Job one, I think, is to, sell your school, sell yourself, get out there. How much sense does it make to play night games on the West Coast? It makes 0 sense. I'll answer my own damn question. None. 0. You shouldn't play a game that kicks off at 7:30. Sorry. Take all the lights out of the stadiums, kick at noon or 3, and that's it. period, if you want the country to see you play football.
Absolutely. I mean, for Pac-12, the whole entire division is in a really nice place too. And that's when you're 18 years old. That's where you want to live, is in a nice place, nice weather. And the whole Pac-12 has that.
Yeah. But, realistically, if you're a kid in, let's say maybe not Texas, because Texas is close enough and it's only it's not as much of a time difference. It's only 2 hours, but let's include Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, also known as the lion's share of all the recruits come out of there. If you're from those states, the Pac-12 is like the witness protection program. You don't, I mean, those kids aren't, if they're up at 11 o'clock, it ain't watching football. So, it's a tough deal. And so it's a challenge that guys like Chip Kelly, have to face. I think it's what has made what they've done at Oregon all the more amazing. Almost through, was it 1, 2, 3 staffs now. There's been some, maybe a few blips during some of the changeovers, but you look at what they're doing, and people always say, oh, it's the Nike money. BS. The Nike money stopped being an excuse a long time ago, because I don't know, unless you haven't been keeping track, everybody's got damn money. They've all got lots of coin to spend. So yeah, in case you couldn't tell, I get a little emotional about the lack of attention for the West Coast. But God, it pissed me off when I was playing, and when I was in, playing for, well, when I was playing, it was the Pac-8, but that's another story. But when I was in the pros, it was the same thing. Yeah. It was, you got past that Mississippi River, you didn't get a whole lot of love, TV and press and everything else wise.
Absolutely.
If it wasn't for Al Davis and Bill Walsh, Pete Carroll later, and some other guys, they still wouldn't be getting the love, but they forced them to.
Well, I did have one more question. What would be a message that you would leave for us or anybody in general on your give up or your dreams or whatever you would leave it with?
What would be a message you would leave us with?
Yeah, it's everybody's got talent. Talent's probably one of the most overrated qualities in most industries and businesses and everything else. Work ethic, perseverance to me, I think are invaluable. I think it's something that, that's what I've always told my son, that when he was growing up, you may not out hit him or out throw him or whatever, but they can't outwork you.
Yeah.
And I sat and watched. The hardest workers I ever played with were Jerry Rice and Roger Craig. And Jerry learned it from Roger, who those guys in the offseason just abused themselves, but they never got tired. They were going as fast the first play as they were the 70th play. So that's kind of the message. Even if you've got talent, even if you're good, there's no telling what you can do to your upside if you're the hardest worker. We always hear the thing about quarterbacks, first guy in, last guy out. I'm sorry, if they're paying you $12-15 million a year, your ass should be in the office. They ought to kick you out of the facility. They ought to call security on you because you're still in there watching tape or lifting weights or trying to get better. That'd be my message.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate Randy Cross coming on the show today. And you have anything you want to promote?
Well, yeah, I've got a podcast too. Randy Cross podcast. I do it about every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And you find that at randycross.com is the easiest way to do it. You can go to Twitter or Facebook or iTunes or all the social media platforms. It's on there. It's on all of them. But randycross.com is the best place to get it.
Go check out randycross.com. Thank you so much, Randy, for coming on the show today. We greatly appreciate it. It was a huge honor.
All right, guys. My pleasure.
Everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, man. Great questions, by the way. Well done.
Thank you.
All right.